Boy, am I glad this section is almost over. New order in Asia. Japan took over a bunch of land also during World War II. I've shown pictures and images of it in maps. I can look back. I can find one here for us to try and better understand exactly how much land I'm talking about. Well, huge chunks of China, Southeast Asia, coastal areas here in China, the island, Philippines, Japan, Dutch East Indies, New Guinea, all of these islands here in the Pacific, stopping right outside of Hawaii, which is right here. And when they took over their lands, they needed raw materials. We knew this about Japan. They didn't have a lot of raw materials in their land. That's one reason why. They even started by taking Korea like 1906 before World War I. Eventually, they took all this land for their raw materials. They set up governments in Burma, which is Southeast Asia, Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, Vietnam, French Indochina, the Philippines, these islands here, which were controlled by the US. They were ruled by the Japanese armies, and they were cruel rulers. They took food, materials, whatever they needed. A million Vietnamese died from starvation because the Japanese took all their food for their soldiers. At first, they called it like Asia for Asiatics. Like, we'll be nicer rulers than the Europeans who'd been ruling much of this land. And the US, which was run by mostly were European people at that point, in the Philippines, they ended up sending 800,000 Koreans to Japan to work as slaves. They also used slaves as prisoners of war that they captured as slaves, including Americans and Filipinos in the Philippines. We also don't forget that in the early part of the war, the rape of Nanking, when they went into and they took over the city of Nanking in China, and the story is that they killed off all the guys, and they used a lot of the women as sex slaves. It's horrible stuff. I was just looking through the wiki page. Don't Google that if you don't want to see some of. I saw a picture. It was like one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. And I will never show you these pictures. It's not the kind of teacher I am. It's going to haunt me, that image. They would behead the men. This was kind of traditional style of killing, and then the women, of course, treated as slaves, sex slaves. In the Philippines, all the Americans were there. When they took over the Philippines, the Americans surrendered, but all prisoners of war were just used as slaves. And they marched them, the famous Bataan Death March. They killed, I think, 10,000 Americans and 30,000 Filipinos, marched and eventually killed by the Japanese government. The Japanese, when they took over this land, they were horribly ruthless too, like right there, right next to Hitler. Hitler was the worst leader ever, the worst human ever, the worst person ever. I'm not going to disagree with you. But it might have been a tie. I think we're going to find that there were some other people who were incredibly awful, including the way the Japanese treated people in the lands they took over in this period, including the rape of Nanking. Nanking, I'm not sure. The starvation of the Vietnamese, the Bataan Death March in the Philippines, the way Koreans were treated. They didn't care, they didn't think of these people as humans, but how do you not? I'm a human, and how do you not think of another human as human? How is that something that exists? Is that Is that an excuse? Like, what is that? It wasn't, you know, just the Japanese. It wasn't just Hitler, you know. But in this section, those are the two specific examples we're studying. We learned about Stalin and the Ukrainians and collectivism. We're going to learn about Mao Zedong and Pol Pot. And it's oftentimes this thing where we're better than them, so they're not humans. They're subhuman. Slavery, American slavery. Like, how? I don't know. Maybe I'm just too 2021, right? Too born in 1975 to even understand how any of this stuff is even possible. Gosh, I hope that we continue to get better and more people don't even understand how this is possible as the future moves forward. May we never go back.